Hello and welcome to Talent 360's Career Seeker series. Today we're talking about you've got 30 seconds. And we're talking very specifically about making a great first impression. We all know that they say that you've got 30 seconds to make a great first impression. And this has been proved to be true. We all like to sum up people, whether we do it consciously or subconsciously, within the first few minutes of meeting them. And whilst it's not possible to change a first impression, research shows that it takes between 5 and 7 further interactions before someone's first impression of you can be altered. Now, just like in a first interview or a first date, if you don't make a great first impression, you're unlikely to get the chance for even a second date or interview. And the chances then of changing what they think about you is slim to none. Today, I'm going to share with you a couple of tips on how you can make sure that you're setting yourself up to set the best first impression possible so that you can get a better chance at securing a job. You've probably heard about see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil monkeys, and today we're going to use those as the basis and foundation for talking about how you need to think about making the very best first impression you can. Let's start with see no evil. A good piece of advice is to remember that you need to dress for the job you want and not the one you have. And by that we mean make sure that the interviewer can visualize you sitting at the desk in the job for which you're applying. If you're a student, make sure that you've paid attention, you've got yourself at least one interview outfit that helps someone see you as an employee and not just as a student. You may be going from a junior administrative role and applying for something more senior. Think about how you would expect somebody to dress as your manager and dress appropriately. If you're working through a recruiter, you have an advantage. Ask them for some advice about how you should be dressing. They will know their clients and their client's environment and will be able to give you guidance on what's acceptable. If you aren't working with a recruiter, then you need to apply your logic and do some research. The more creative, the newer the startup, the more likely the dress code is to be relaxed. The more formal, the more corporate. If you're unsure, always err on the side of caution and dress more formally because it's far simpler for someone to be able to tell you that you don't need to wear a suit and tie and that jeans would be okay than for someone to think about how you might fit in a more formal environment if how you've come in on your first interview and your first impression is underdressed. Whilst I say you should err on the side of caution and dress more formally, you can always think about how you can add some personality. Personality can be brought in by an interesting piece of jewelry, a scarf, a watch, a tie, something that gives the interviewer a little bit of insight into who you are as a person, rather than as just another interviewee. Remember too that considering coloring will be also important. There are many things to think about, from how it looks on you in terms of your body shape and your coloring, but also thinking about the psychology associated with colors. If you're interested in learning more, there's an article in a great level of detail on our website, www.talent360.co.za. To use just 2 color examples, the first is red. Now, whilst I love red, it's not a color I recommend to individuals to wear to an interview. And that's because red is a very decisive and divisive color. For some, like me, we love it, and we think that people who choose to wear red are confident. For others, red can be perceived as an aggressive color. And if they saw someone coming into an interview wearing red, they may have a negative perception about you, believing that you want to be the center of attention. Probably the safest color would be blue. Think about how many company logos are blue, and that's because blue is associated with trust, with honesty, and with steadfastness. Blue works both for men and women. Many of us, however, tend to default to grey or black, the staple diet in a corporate environment. And whilst that's okay, remember how you could inject a little bit of personality or color to the outfit so that you look not like you're going to a funeral and that you stand out from the crowd. Remember too to pay attention to detail. Attention to detail is one of those characteristics that all employers are looking for in every kind of employee, because it's the small things that often make a great customer experience or ruin a customer experience. So when you're thinking about this in the context of how you make a great first impression in an interview, pay attention to your outfit. Are there buttons missing? Is there a hem falling down? Is there a stain, perhaps? Have you polished your shoes? Have you made sure that there are no chips in your nail polish, ladies? All of these things are small, but will play a big role in how an interviewer perceives you and the attention to detail you've allocated in thinking about coming to the interview. Remember, too, under the concept of C, that we need to maintain eye contact. This is absolutely essential. Eye contact in any interaction is important, but especially in an interview. We believe, as people, that if someone is not willing or able to look us in the eye, that there's a reason for that. Either that they're not being truthful or that they are hiding something. So make sure that you maintain eye contact without getting into a staring contest, of course. If you're uncomfortable, a good tip is just to look just over the left shoulder of the individual to whom you're speaking and to focus on something behind them, perhaps something on the wall or something out the window. It's not as good as real eye contact, but it certainly beats staring down at your shoes. Let's talk about hear no evil, and in this context, we don't want the interviewer to be hearing anything that isn't a good thing. But please make sure that you've done your homework. In today's connected world, there is absolutely no reason why you shouldn't do research about the company that you're going to interview at. Look them up online to find out what they do, what are their products, what are their services, who are their customers, what does the organogram look like. In fact, you might even be able to find out a little bit more about the people who are going to be interviewing you. Follow them on social media. This will give you an idea of what's important in their world right now, some of the challenges that they might be facing, how they interact with their customers, what the culture is of the business in terms of how they deal with employees. Remember to listen carefully to the questions as well. Too often we're listening simply to respond, which means we're busy formulating in our minds the answer and not really paying attention to the question. Listen to understand so that you're able to answer the question. And don't be afraid of a little silence. Rather take a few moments to think through the question and what you want to answer, then start talking before you've really thought about what you're going to say. Think before you speak. And please ensure that you've got at least 3 questions prepared to ask the interviewer. Interviewers all want to know that the individual is interested, and a good way of understanding whether someone's interested in the job is how they ask questions at the end of the interview. Now, the reason I've always said to individuals is to think about 3 questions is not because you need to ask all 3, but because you want to have a backup plan. If you've only thought about one question and you get to the end of the interview and they've answered that question during the course of the interview and you don't then ask anything, you run the risk of them perceiving you as being disinterested. Or you run the risk of asking them anyway because you're afraid of not asking a question, and then they think you haven't paid attention because they've answered that question just a few moments before. Finally, let's talk about speak no evil. Please, guys, don't lie. You will get caught out. My hubby is from Uruguay, and he speaks, obviously, Spanish, and one of the sayings translated in Spanish he uses quite a lot is that lions have little legs and they can't run very fast. And by that we mean you will get caught out. Today, you cannot make any kind of assertion that you've done something or can do something if you're not confident that that will be backed up by any of the referees that the employer is likely to contact. Remember to speak slowly, clearly, and with sufficient volume. I've had several instances where I've had someone who's been probably quite shy and has mumbled their way through an interview. I might give them one opportunity, maybe 2, to ask them to speak up. But after the 3rd time, I've just made a decision that this is not someone who's interested in the job or is going to be capable of doing the job. After all, communication is an absolutely essential skill for any job. Remember to answer the question. So this goes hand in hand with thinking through the question, understanding the question, and then giving them the answer. Remember not to fall into the trap of trying to go off on a tangent. Most companies will start to employ the idea of competency-based or behavioral-based interviewing, which means they're going to ask you questions about, tell them about a time, give them an example. So you need to think carefully about the answers and then to answer the question. In this regard, never use we. Always use I. So for example, if the question was, tell us about a time that you ran a project, you could say, I have run a project X, Y, and Z. I haven't myself had an opportunity to run a project, but if I were to be given the chance to be a project lead, this is what I do. Even if you were part of a team, don't default to we. Rather say, I was part of a project team and my role within the team was X, Y, and Z. Interviewers are always nervous about candidates who constantly talk in we because they begin to wonder whether you have that level of experience, skill, or confidence, or whether you're hiding behind the achievements of a team. Remember too that there's a fine line between bragging and selling yourself, so we need to tread carefully. If you don't tell them why you're good for the job, they're not going to know. And so selling yourself and positioning yourself correctly is really important. And there are tips and techniques on how to do this. If, for example, the question was, why do you think you're good at sales? As opposed to just launching in, I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, perhaps you could think about framing it by saying, well, I believe that the reason my customers keep coming back to me is X, Y, or Z. My customers tell me that the reason they like to buy from me is because I do Y, Z, and A. Do you see what I did there? We've made them realize how good I am, but by framing it in the context of what others have said about me or think about me. As we live in the digital age, if someone, a potential employer, was to go and do a Google search on you right now, would it be a thumbs up or a thumbs down? 67% of employers are doing searches online on potential employees. And what they're looking for is they're looking for signs, not only negative signs where there might be areas of risk. So for example, where you're posting inappropriate content, where perhaps you are give indications of inappropriate behavior. But they're also looking for reasons to employ you. They're thinking about what your network looks like, what kind of things you're sharing, what kind of content you're participating in, what your communication skills are like. So please make sure that part of your good first impression is that your social media online profile or online CV, for want of a better term, is giving the very best first impression. If you don't want employers to see you online, so for example, your Facebook, which for many people is a private platform, make sure your settings are set to private. But remember that anything that's on the internet is not going to be destroyed, even if you think you've deleted it. So do yourself a favor as part of this exercise, go and Google yourself now and find out what it says about you. Think about how you can clean up your profile to ensure that the great first impression that you make in the interview is backed up by what they see online. In conclusion, remember that the goal of a first interview is really to get a second interview. Just as the goal of a first date is not to get married, it's to get a second date. Think about it like that. You want to make the very best first impression you can so that the interviewers believe that you're the right person for the job, or at least one of the right people for the job, so that you get invited back for a second interview. The second interaction will give you a greater level of depth and detail to be able to show them just how you can not only fulfill the skills requirements of the job, but also fit into the culture as well. All the best as you look for your new job. Please connect with us online. You can find us at YouTube. You can follow me or Talent360 on Twitter. Join our Facebook page or follow me on LinkedIn. Thanks so much for sharing today.